The dog halted sharply at the tree line, tail rigid, ears alert. The deputy followed his gaze. There she was, an elderly woman, wrists bound, uniform tattered. One faded patch, Air Force Special Operations. What the K-9 did next silenced the whispering town forever. The German shepherd froze just beyond the clearing. Morning mist hung low over the pine forest floor as Deputy Carla Finch gently tugged the leash, but Ranger wouldn't budge. He stood perfectly still, nose high, tail straight as an arrow. "Ranger," she called softly. The dog didn't bark, didn't whine. He simply stepped forward once, then twice, then stopped again, his body language screaming that something was wrong. That's when Carla saw it, at the base of a half-fallen oak, partially concealed by wet leaves and pine needles, a figure slumped forward. Hands pulled tight behind her back, bound to the trunk. Silver-gray hair matted against her head, cheeks hollow with dehydration. For a heart-stopping moment, Carla thought they were too late. Then she saw the woman's chest rise slightly, her cracked lips moving without sound. Carla knelt quickly, radio crackling on her hip. "Sheriff, I've got a live female, Caucasian, elderly, found restrained near mile marker 12. EMS needed ASAP, possible hypothermia." She shrugged off her department jacket and carefully wrapped it around the woman's trembling shoulders. The woman didn't speak, didn't look at her, just stared ahead with distant eyes that seemed to be seeing something else entirely. As Carla gently checked for injuries, her fingers brushed against something on the woman's torn shirt collar. A patch, faded but still recognizable, Air Force Special Operations Command. Her breath caught in her throat. This broken, silent woman was a veteran. Ranger's behavior shifted dramatically. The normally disciplined K-9 moved closer to the woman, his posture changing from alert to protective. He lowered his muzzle near her hand, not sniffing as he would a stranger, but gently pressing his nose against her fingers. Sheriff Ray Hammond arrived 15 minutes later. By then, EMTs had started cutting the zip ties and loading the woman onto a stretcher. She hadn't spoken a word, just clutched Carla's jacket around her shoulders like it was armor. "Any ID?" Ray asked, his voice low and concerned. "Nothing," Carla replied, watching as the paramedics secured an 4-line. "No wallet, no phone, just this." She handed him the patch, now separated from the jacket. Ray held it in his weathered palm for a long moment. The sheriff had served 2 Marines, decades ago, and his face hardened as he recognized what it meant. Ranger sat nearby, eyes never leaving the stretcher, his body still angled toward the woman as if standing guard. Something about this wasn't just wrong, it was personal, and everyone present could feel it. By 9 a.m., Pine Hollow already knew. Small towns always did. The EMTs hadn't even left the forest edge before the chatter started, they found someone out there. Old woman tied to a tree like a criminal. Some said she was just a drifter, others whispered about a military jacket. When Sheriff Hammond returned to the station, 2 reporters were already waiting outside. He waved them off firmly. "No name, no statement. Not until we know who she is." Inside, Carla poured herself a cup of stale coffee with shaking hands. She couldn't stop thinking about the woman's eyes, how they barely blinked, how they looked straight through her as if uncertain whether she was still alive. They'd brought her to County General, stable but barely responsive, no identification except the patch and the bruises around her wrists and ankles. She didn't wander out there, Carla said, standing in Ray's office doorway. Someone put her there. That was intentional, planned. Ray nodded grimly. He knew small towns didn't forget faces, but somehow, no one seemed to recognize this woman, at least not yet. Out in the kennel behind the station, Ranger sat alert, refusing food and water. Every time someone opened the back door, he looked toward the woods. "He wants to go back," Carla observed. Ray looked up from his paperwork. "Let him." It was the nurse who first noticed it, a small, faded tattoo inside the woman's left wrist. A date, Then a name, Harris, Rachel J. The attending physician told the charge nurse, who called the station. Within an hour, Sheriff Hammond stood in room 214 of County General. Rachel lay still, eyes closed, dripping slowly. A bruise darkened her temple, and scrapes marked both arms as if someone had dragged her through the undergrowth. Ray pulled a chair close to the bed. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said quietly, "but I'm going to talk like you can." He took a deep breath. "Your name is Rachel Harris." "We checked. Air Force, Special Operations, retired Master Sergeant. Served in Desert Storm and later in Afghanistan. Commendations include the Bronze Star and Air Force Cross." No response, but Ray continued. "That doesn't answer the big question, does it? What happened to you? Who did this, and why?" Ray unfolded a creased newspaper clipping from his pocket, a 4th of July parade photo from 10 years back. There on the veterans' float, beside the flag, stood Rachel Harris in full dress uniform. Back straight, eyes forward, dignified. Back then, she had been known, respected. Back then, she had a home. He turned the paper over. The address listed was a farmhouse on Lakeview Road. He sent Carla to check it out while he stayed with Rachel. The house was still there, barely. The paint had peeled away in large patches, shutters hung crooked, and the mailbox had been torn from its post. Inside, it looked like someone had cleared out in a hurry, dust covering empty picture frames, a couch with torn cushions, and in the corner, a service medal display case, shattered. Carla took photos, careful not to disturb potential evidence. In the kitchen drawer, she found utility bills addressed to Rachel Harris, dated just 3 months earlier. Whatever had happened was recent. Back at the hospital, Rachel stirred slightly. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then suddenly sharp with awareness. She whispered something so faint that Ray had to lean closer. "Did Ranger find me?" she asked, her voice rough from disuse. Ray straightened, surprised. "The K-9. Yes, he led us to you. Do you know him?" Rachel's eyes drifted closed again, but she nodded once. "Trained him, before he joined the department." The next morning, Ray took Ranger back into the woods without a handler. The German Shepherd leapt from the cruiser before the engine fully stopped, no leash, no commands, just instinct. Ray followed close behind, his hand resting on his service weapon. The forest looked different in daylight, less menacing but no less secretive. The old oak still stood where they'd found Rachel, a ring of disturbed earth marking the spot. Ranger circled it once, twice, then bolted east through the underbrush. Ray followed, his heart pounding harder than he wanted to admit. 30 yards deeper into the woods, the dog stopped, paws planted firmly, tail stiff. Ray pushed aside the brush and found a small, weathered backpack half buried under pine needles and wet leaves. He crouched down and unzipped it carefully. Inside, a tin of crackers, military dog tags on a broken chain, a creased photograph, a legal envelope, and a house key. Ray opened the envelope with gloved hands. Inside was a copy of a reverse mortgage agreement signed 18 months ago, Rachel's shaky signature beside another name, Brady Harris. Brady Harris, Ray read aloud, committing the name to memory as Ranger whined softly beside him. Carla had pulled the records back at the station. Brady Harris was Rachel's nephew, her only living relative. He had filed for guardianship 6 months ago, moved into the Lakeview property shortly after, then sold it 3 months later. The house wasn't abandoned, Ray said grimly, staring at the documents spread across his desk. It was stolen. He stood in the woods, clutching the photograph from the backpack. In it, a younger Rachel smiled, standing proud in her uniform beside 2 other female airmen. On the back, in faded ink, "We served so others wouldn't have to." Ranger let out a low whine and nudged the corner of the backpack. Ray looked down at the dog with newfound understanding. "You're not just a tracker, are you?" he whispered. "You were her training project. the only one she trusted to find her. The dog wagged his tail once in what seemed like confirmation. Ray's jaw tightened as the pieces fell into place. "She left a trail," he said. "But someone made sure she couldn't follow it back." Sheriff Hammond sat across from Brady Harris in a booth at the gas station cafe. Brady looked comfortable, pressed shirt, Bluetooth earpiece, keys to a new Ford pickup on the table. He smiled when he saw Ray. "Sheriff, to what do I owe the honor?" Ray didn't return the smile. "I found your aunt." Brady's face twitched almost imperceptibly. "Aunt Rachel? I didn't know she was missing." Ray slid the reverse mortgage agreement across the table. "Looks like you knew enough to sign her house away." Brady shrugged, his composure barely disturbed. "She wasn't all there, hadn't been for years. Told me she wanted out, wanted to start fresh. She also told someone to chain her to a tree." Ray's voice remained even, but his eyes hardened. "You sold the house, got power of attorney, emptied her accounts. But you forgot something." "What's that?" Brady asked, his confident facade beginning to crack. "A woman like Rachel Harris doesn't disappear without leaving a mark. And apparently, she left one on a dog she trained." Ray tapped the photograph that had been tucked in the backpack. "You ever serve, Brady?" Brady scoffed. "No offense, but I didn't see the point. She did 3 tours. Saved lives. Came home and built that house with her own hands. You walked her right out of it and left her to die. That's a serious accusation, Sheriff." "No," Ray said, leaning forward. "That's a statement of fact." "You didn't just rob a woman," Ray continued, his voice steady. "You robbed a decorated veteran. You robbed this town of one of its own." Brady grabbed the envelope and stood. "You don't have proof of anything." Ray stood too, towering over the younger man. "Maybe not the kind that holds up in court. But I've got a veterans organization with members who served with her. And I've got a town that's going to know what you did by sundown." Brady stepped back, sudden wariness in his eyes. "What do you want?" Ray didn't raise his voice. "You're going to return the money, every dollar. You're going to sign the house back over. And you're going to do it quietly." Brady laughed nervously. "And if I don't?" Ray nodded once toward the window. Brady looked out across the street where several pickup trucks had pulled up. Men and women in veteran organization jackets stood shoulder to shoulder. No signs, no yelling, just watching. Ray picked up the photo and tucked it back into his pocket. "If you don't," he said evenly, "I'll let them handle the conversation." The paperwork moved faster than anyone expected. By Friday, the house on Lakeview Road was legally back in Rachel's name. Brady didn't fight it, didn't show his face again. Rumor was he left town before the ink dried, no press, no apologies, just silence. But the town remembered. A flyer appeared on the church bulletin board that Sunday, community cleanup, Lakeview House, Saturday at 8 a.m. No signature, no request for volunteers, just a quiet notice. By morning, the driveway was full. Old neighbors brought rakes and paint. High school students dragged out damaged furniture and sorted what could be saved. A man from the hardware store dropped off supplies with a simple note, "Tell her it's from Jessica, 381st Support Squadron." Rachel sat on the porch, still weak but upright, watching as Ranger lay at her feet, head on his paws as if he'd never left her side. Katie, the nurse who'd been with her since day one at the hospital, knelt beside her with a mug of tea. "You okay with all this?" she asked gently. Rachel looked out over her lawn, teenagers painting the porch swing, veterans patching shingles, a group installing a new ramp alongside the steps. She nodded once. "I didn't think anyone remembered." "They didn't," Katie said softly. "But they do now." Rachel reached into the pocket of her flannel shirt and pulled out the photograph from her backpack. She turned it over and carefully wrote something on the back, then held it out to Katie. "What's this?" Katie asked. "Just a note," Rachel replied, her voice stronger now. "In case I forget again." Katie smiled and read the words, "Not forgotten, just quiet." Down the road, someone started a grill. Someone else brought chairs. It wasn't a party, but it felt like something being restored to its rightful place in the world. Ray pulled up in his cruiser just before sunset. He stepped out and walked over to where Rachel sat. "You ready for what comes next?" he asked. The woman gave a faint smile. "I already had the hard part," she said. "Now I just want to live where my boots still fit the floor." Pine Hollow didn't do ceremonies often, and when they did, they were small, maybe a ribbon, maybe a plaque. No spotlights, no lengthy speeches. But this one was different. It was held on a Sunday afternoon under the old oak tree behind the courthouse, the same place where they honored local war dead every Memorial Day. This time there were no flags at half-mast, no black ribbons, just folding chairs and quiet, respectful faces. Rachel sat in the front row wearing a clean blue shirt and her old service jacket, freshly pressed. Ranger sat beside her, vest polished, eyes alert. Sheriff Hammond stepped up to the small podium. He didn't speak long. "There are some who never ask to be remembered," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "They don't raise their hands. They don't chase headlines. They just do their duty and sometimes get forgotten in the noise that comes after." He looked down at Rachel. "This town forgot someone, and we're here to say we won't do that again." He turned and picked up a small wooden plaque, handing it to Rachel. It read, "Rachel J. Harris, Air Force Special Operations. Not forgotten, just quiet." The crowd stood, no applause, just standing in respect. One by one, people approached. Some shook her hand, some just nodded. Others placed small tokens beside her chair, a service patch, a photograph, a folded flag. Then came Ranger's moment. Deputy Finch stepped forward and knelt, pulling a small box from her coat. Inside was a custom K-9 medallion. "For service beyond duty," the deputy read aloud, "and loyalty that never faltered." Ranger didn't understand the words, but when the crowd bowed their heads, he lay his head gently across Rachel's knee. The moment didn't need music or headlines. It just needed people to see and remember. Mayor Wilson approached last, handing Rachel a set of new keys. "Welcome home, Master Sergeant," he said simply. "We've got your 6 from now on." The porch light at the Lakeview house stayed on that night, not because someone forgot, but because someone finally came home. Rachel sat in her old rocking chair, the same one her father had made before she ever thought of putting on a uniform. Ranger lay curled at the base of the steps, no vest now, just a dog with watchful eyes and a full belly. The town had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of silence that forgets. It was the kind that respects. Katie stopped by just before dusk, leaving a paper bag on the porch, soup, bread, and a note, "Same recipe my Air Force dad used to make. You're not alone anymore." Rachel chuckled softly. She picked up the bag, sat back down, and looked at the stars emerging in the evening sky. She didn't need speeches or parades. She just needed to be seen, and now she had been. She reached down to scratch behind Ranger's ears. "You found me when even I forgot where I was," she whispered. "Guess that makes you the real hero." The dog thumped his tail once, then settled into sleep. Rachel leaned back, the chair creaking gently beneath her. For the first time in years, the night wind didn't sound hollow and threatening. It sounded like home. In the weeks that followed, things changed in Pine Hollow. The VFW Hall started a new program to check on elderly veterans living alone. The high school began an oral history project, recording the stories of local service members. Even the town council passed a resolution to ensure no veterans' property tax issues would go unaddressed. Small changes, perhaps, but meaningful ones. All because a dog refused to give up on his former trainer, and a community realized what they had almost lost. Rachel still kept to herself mostly, old habits die hard. But every Tuesday, she visited the elementary school with Ranger, teaching children about service dogs and quiet heroes. Not all wounds are visible, she would tell them. And not all heroes wear capes. Some just wear dog tags, or collars. If you believe some heroes never stop serving, even in silence, subscribe and help us share the stories that still matter. Comment respect below if you think we should honor all our veterans, male and female, before they're forgotten.